Hey everybody, welcome to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. Make a play, Canada's choice for free casino game, sports odds, and poker strategies. David Alter alongside Paul Hendrick, myself at Wells Fargo Arena, where the Toronto Maple Leafs defeat the Philadelphia Flyers 6-2 on the tail end of back-to-back nights to wrap up the first half of the season. And Henny, the story of the game for sure. There was a lot to kind of pick apart here, but Conor Timmins, he's played 4 NHL seasons, not full. This was his 53rd NHL game, spread over 4 years. He's had a lot of assists, has made an impact with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the short time that he's been here, but finally gets his first NHL goal and steps into a situation where we didn't know if he was going to play. There is some injury stuff that we will get to a bit later on, but Conor Timmins slides back in. What did you think of the way he kind of just didn't really show any sort of drop-off in the game after being a scratch for the last 3?
I've got to admit, Dave, this hockey player continues to amaze me. And as you've mentioned, because of injuries and all that has plagued him for such a long time, especially at the professional level, we've really not had a chance to see him. But he was a second-round pick. This was a highly regarded hockey player who now is getting an opportunity to play because of injuries in the Leaf system, and now is going to have to find a way to stay within that system, given the fact that, in the time being, everybody's healthy. He played 17-plus minutes tonight. He had 3 block shots. But the goal that he scored for his first in the National Hockey League, it wasn't a bounce off a couple of rear ends and off a helmet and in. It was a snipe. It was top shelf, to the goaltender's right side, his left side. It was absolutely impressive. He's playing amongst a very talented elite group, but I kind of think he feels like he belongs in that group. He makes a great first pass. He's not the best skater out there, but he's pretty good, and he's a right-handed shot. And I think it was an interesting tweet in terms of, all things considered, if everybody's healthy, do you keep Conor Timmins in your top 6? And I kind of ask, well, who comes out? You're not taking any of those other right-handed shots out. Maybe it's Rasmus Sandin, who was -2, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater right yet. It's just a good situation for head coach Sheldon Keefe. You're going to need all these defensemen at one point in time, and there doesn't seem to be a drop-off regardless of who is in there, and there's certainly not a drop-off when Conor Timmins is playing.
No, it's been interesting. He had to kind of come out, work with development staff and do a lot of different things. But you could tell that when he got that goal, it caught a lot of people by surprise. And, he was even talking about after the game that he was kind of waiting for it. And then this is how he reacted when it finally happened.
Yeah, I think I was squeezing my stick a little on some opportunities after the first 30 games. But yeah, I just had to shoot more pucks, and luckily that one went in, so it was a nice feeling.
With the fully healthy lineup, you kind of had to sit out for a little bit. What did you learn from that time with the development staff? Something that allowed you to kind of come back and not miss a step?
I'm just trying to make the most of every day. Obviously, there's opportunity to get better every day, and with all the resources we have in the organization, there's a lot of opportunities. So I've just been trying to work as hard as I can and be ready when I do come in.
This was kind of interesting because those 4 years, Henny, that he's played and why he's only played 53 NHL games because he gets hurt a lot. And then there was a lot of weight with bated breath when he got involved in the collision at the net with Wade Allison and then immediately went off. He admitted after the game that he just had the wind knocked out of him. But because of that, the Leafs were kind of cautious. A few minutes passed before the Leafs put Timmins back on the ice, even though he was on the bench. And then that first shift back, he capitalizes with a goal. It's kind of a kind of good way to bat off the injury demons, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, you're right. And he does not want to get hurt again. He's been on the sideline, and you've covered this hockey club long enough. I remember James Reimer with a high ankle sprain who was skating with a goaltending coach over on the Marley pad across the hallway at the Ford Performance Center in Kipling Avenue in Toronto. And a lonely existence where you get sick of the strength and conditioning coach. You get sick of the athletic therapist because it's just you and them one-on-one. Conor Timmins knows all about that. He does not want to go back there again to that hell. It might be necessary in the event that he has to, but if you can avoid it at all costs, there was no way he was going to stay off the ice that long tonight in Philadelphia, and it paid off, and he gets his first NHL goal.
John Tavares picks up the puck, flicks it over to, actually, Ilya Samsonov caught it first before giving it to Bobby Hastings for safekeeping. He said he doesn't know exactly what he's going to do with the puck yet, probably send it back home. But John Tavares is a good person to kind of speak onto what that goal really does mean for someone like Timmins.
It's special. You never forget your first. It's obviously incredible once you get the opportunity to play in the league, but then to say you scored at the NHL in the NHL is always a special feeling and a great one. And I think it was the winner, so even added bonus there.
What a night for John Tavares and that whole second line there. Tavares finishes with a goal and 2 assists, as does Calle Jarnkrok and Mitch Marner with 3 helpers. That second line since Jarnkrok has been back has been something else, and it's starting to kind of maybe shift that if they are looking for trade deadline things, maybe they don't fix that spot and they like where things are kind of going there. I don't know. What do you think, Henny?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's another nice situation. And, just crunch the numbers with Jarnkrok. 11 points in his last 9 games, 14 points in his last 15 games played. That includes prior to the injury. He certainly fits in well. We talked about and perhaps joked about it last week that, you could put you or I on that left side and we might pick up a point or two. That's kind of ridiculous. But Jarnkrok, he is the Swiss Army knife. They've talked about it on the broadcast. He can fit in anywhere. But to answer your question, I do think if you're going to plan on going on a run, at least win that first playoff series for the club, which will be big, and go further than that, which is what they expect to do, I think you're going to have to get some elite help up there and have a player like Jarnkrok who could plug in anywhere and any of those top 3 lines, 4 lines if need be, because the playoffs are a different animal. But in the time being, since he's been moved there, they've not missed a beat whatsoever. And as we're going to hear from head coach Sheldon Keefe, he knows this player's got some great hands, and we know what he can do in killing penalties and all these other things that are so important, and the reason why Kyle Dubas signed him to the contract he did in the offseason. This guy fits a lot of holes, and the fact that he's able to produce so well and look good doing it in terms of the quality of passes and, of course, goals, quite impressive. And, there might be some pressure playing with those 2 other guys, but he's not feeling it. He's feeling it all for the right reasons. So to answer your question, I still think they're going to go out and get a somewhat quality left winger to play in that top 6. But for the time being, Calle Jarnkrok's going to try to convince all of us that they don't have to make that trade. Maybe they go and concentrate on a defenseman instead. It's going to be fun the next couple of months.
Yeah, certainly there's going to be some things you're going to have to figure out from a salary cap standpoint down to 3rd when the line takes place. But tonight, again, that second line, the Leafs' best line, 72% expected goals for. So that's their shot share. That's, again, just a dominant performance. That is 12% better than the next line. The Kampf line was the second best line in that department as well. And Calle Jarnkrok, remember, he had that groin injury. He had to miss some time. And then he came right back on December 20th and hasn't really missed a step. And Sheldon Keefe talked about why he thinks that break was actually good for someone like Jarnkrok.
No, he's played a lot better for us since he's come back from the injury. I think the time with the injury really helped him, just get really comfortable here. You come into a new team and you kind of arrive shortly before training camp, and then things are moving real fast, and you got a young family and stuff, and new team, new organization, new teammates, all that. It takes some time. I think the injury actually really helped sort of settle things down, allowed him some time to get comfortable, allowed him some time to really just work at his game. And I think since he's come back, he's been terrific, and he complements those guys well, like we talked about last night. Does a good job defensively, and the puck comes to him, he can make a play on it, and when he's the trigger guy, he has the ability to finish. So we like those qualities about him, and he did a terrific job on the penalty kill tonight as well.
Yeah, that penalty kill executing another big goal when it became 3-2. It was kind of an interesting scenario, an offensive zone faceoff for the PK. They win the draw, but it was kind of whistled down, and Liljegren shoots it, hits the crossbar, and then they redo it again, and he actually buries it. They just called the same play because it worked so well, and that all starts with Yarncroke, and so he's getting it done on the PK like he did tonight. But just even after the game, talking to Tavares and Mitch about what they liked about Yarncroke's game is there's predictability when they have him there on the line. And I think that's the most important thing for keeping those two guys happy is that they can read him perfectly and know what he's going to do. And when they kind of had to shuffle around different players, it's not that they struggled, but they just added a different variable. And now we're well into the season and you want consistency there. And even if they do look to improve by adding someone in that spot that could conceivably be better, there's not a lot of time to kind of find the chemistry and mesh from the trade deadline on for such a premier position. So Yarncroke is doing his job to kind of force the issue in his favor and is now on pace for what could be a career high in goals if he keeps going.
Yeah, you're right. And, you think back to the legacy of Zach Hyman while he was here and how he's missed. He'd fit well here, just not fit well into the team's salary structure. And he's out west playing with some world-class players again, and he's producing. He may have himself 40 goals this season when all is said and done. But Michael Bunting and Calle Jarnkrok, they're not the big name players. We certainly know who they are. They're big in this part, but not in the National Hockey League. With all due respect, even to Bunting, but they have played such a valuable role playing that left side for those top two lines. And you've got to have somebody there who's going to do a lot of the leg work, a lot of the corner work, and be able to complement the players on that line with some offensive skill as well. We've seen it from Bunting. We're seeing it now from Jarnkrok. And Dave, it's amazing how different a player can be when they're healthy. Jarnkrok looks healthy, and I just wonder what stage he was at prior to them sitting him out, given the injury he had. Obviously, he was not the same player we're seeing now.
Yeah, well, I mean, he admitted that first time back that it had been something that had been battling, that he had been kind of dealing with and playing through for a little while. So, of course, when you're coming back, if you want to be 100% and if you're trying to fight through things and things aren't getting better and it's affecting your play, that is certainly going to have an impact. And not only that, but as Sheldon mentioned, he got married in the offseason, had to go through a lot of life changes. This is a guy who's always taken the long-term contracts, prefers safety in that regard. He had a long contract with the Nashville Predators that was kind of identical to this in the $2 to $2 million range, but for like 6 years, to the point where this guy likes stability, safety. It's not quite the same type of contracts you see from anywhere else. And remember, the Leafs gave him pretty much everything they possibly could in signing bonus in those 4 years as well, to keep that AAV down and to dissuade him from signing with other teams that were definitely interested in someone like Jarnkrok. And you can see now why he was desirable by some other teams. Sure, it didn't work out with the Calgary Flames in the playoffs. They had him as a third line center, might have been a bit miscast in that spot. But even before, when he was with Nashville, he had to go through change for the first time. He got picked by Seattle in the expansion draft. That was a weird year for everyone there involved. And then he had to go through change again going north. And then he had to go through change one more time. So if Jarnkrok gets some stability there and continues to play the way he plays, then he can force non-change on his line. Of course, injuries and other stuff can always do that. And as professional athletes, you kind of have to get used to that. So that'll be interesting to see how Calle Jarnkrok kind of adjusts. Okay, so this is a big bounce back game for Matt Murray as well. We talked about how Ilya Samsonov was able to kind of get the belt and have a much better performance the other night on Saturday against the Detroit Red Wings, making 29 making 22 saves, but he was pretty good on that. Matt Murray gets 29 saves tonight and looked pretty solid. The Leafs had their moments at times, and kind of similar to Samsonov. Maybe a goal or two he would have liked to have back, but when the saves were needed, he certainly came out to play, and that should at least give some fans some pause about the state of the goaltending situation with both guys coming up big in the weekend jaunt here.
Yeah, and you do get nervous, though, when you see the stretch they've been in. You just get nervous, but you've got to take a deep breath. It's the same with Morgan Riley and Leafs Nation on Twitter. Everybody just take a deep breath. But let's get back to the goaltending. I was nervous about Samsonov and him making saves on his stomach. Again, it just brought back memories of 2013 and James Reimer in Game 7.
Yeah.
A goaltender's not very confident when they are on their stomach, and we saw a lot of that from Ilya. But he had a good bounce-back game, has worked hard. He's got a great team in front of him. Murray's won a couple of Stanley Cups, and if he's able to stay healthy, much like Calle Jarnkrok, I think we're going to get a good idea of just how good he can be once again. Now 6-2-2 lifetime against the Flyers. Samsonov, on the other hand, 9-1 lifetime against Philly. Heading into this game, obviously with a back-to-back situation, he wasn't going to play tonight. But the experience of these goaltenders in the Metropolitan, given time in Washington and in Pittsburgh, no strangers to playing game in the building you're in right now, and that showed here tonight. But plenty of fight to come back, provide some stability, and it's a great situation that they have for a 1A and 1B in the debate. I think will continue to go on. Who exactly is 1A and who is 1B? And I think if they can keep it this way for the better part this season and then see who's able to go on a run come April, this is a good situation for head coach Sheldon Keefe.
Oh, it certainly is. And it's so weird. We got to have a talk with Ilya because we didn't get a chance to talk to you, Eddie, about this, but that Saturday morning when we were looking at who was going to be the goaltender, and you've been through the routine before. You see whoever takes the home net at home in the morning skate, and it was a full morning skate because they didn't practice the day before. And Samsonov takes the visiting net. I'm starting to think he just doesn't know about that part of the position, because there's been a couple of weird things like that with Samsonov, to the point where he came on the ice first and he went straight to the visiting net. And Matt Murray kind of looked and saw and just went to the other net. And I guess he wasn't going to be like, oh, I'm going to take that net. But he just did. And then it was really strange because we were all preparing for Matt Murray to kind of go in there. And if we're talking about 1A and 1B, and, if you're trying to judge who's supposed to be the 1B, the second game of a back-to-back that's supposed to be more difficult is usually where you put your B goaltender in there. But they didn't do that. And they've kind of been going based on feel and opponent, as Sheldon Keefe said before the game. And so that seems to have been the right call, although the way both played, they certainly look like they will be fine. So again, let's go back to Conor Timmins for a sec, because it transitions us into TJ Brody, who did not play. Sheldon Keefe said that he's dealing with something, and because he's banged up, they wanted to give him another day. So that, combined with the day off, it gives him 3 solid days and kind of put him at day-to-day. Said it was something new, nothing like the oblique injury that he sustained last month and couldn't play through. So it doesn't sound like anything too serious. But again, Timmins comes in, and we really should go back to that debate. And you tease the poll that I put out, and I'm just getting the results right now.
What have you got?
With a fully healthy lineup, should Conor Timmins be an everyday player? 86.4% of 682 total votes said yes. 13.6% said no.
Who comes out, Dave?
I don't know. You mentioned Sandin. That might be the way to go there. I don't think you take Timothy Liljegren out. Some people might argue Justin Hall, because when Timmins was out initially, a lot of the online chatter dominated around Justin Hall's performance, but he's fit in well. He played with Morgan Riley today. They really had to shuffle up 2 defense pairs, which was very interesting. When it just kind of shows you how not disorienting, but like how out of sorts the defense can kind of look without TJ Brody, because they really do like having him on the right side, even though he can play on the left. So I don't know, what do you do, Henny, in this situation? It's a good problem to have, but especially if you're looking for depth at the position, is Conor Timmins like an everyday guy at this point that you're comfortable with him between now and come April for the opening game of the season, or do you just have to wait and see because there could be some drops?
Yeah, I think there might be, but he's been pretty consistent. And, as he said, the opportunity with the organization to develop, I mean, it's really quite incredible what they have with nutritionists, therapists, all those coaches. And it's an abundance of riches that the Leafs are able to put out there. And he's thrived in the situation. But you'd like to keep him on right. I don't think you take Justin Hall, another right-handed shot, but Justin can really skate. He's got a lot of experience. Second highest ice time tonight, only to Morgan Rielly. Both those guys were up over 20 minutes. Morgan at 22:54, and good to see that. But for the time being, I think Timmins he's going to fit in well. I don't want to see Rasmus Sandin come out. I don't want to see his confidence impacted, but he's got to stay healthy moving forward, and he's got to be better. He was on the ice for both those goals here tonight. Granted, Murray should have had one of them, maybe even the second one, but at least one of those. So, yeah, it's a tough question. He stays in. He's not going to hurt this team. He's going to continue to develop. They're going to use him as they get to the playoffs, and I'm going to go back. I think they've got to get a right-handed grit grinding shot somewhere, and you can smile, but it's going to come back to Luke Schenn because the Canucks are going to be bailing soon with a lot of these guys. And I think Luke would fit in just well, not necessarily have to play all the time, but certainly be able to spell the right side when they need it. But right now, Conor Timmins isn't coming out, and I wish for the second half of your poll that if so, who comes out? I know Sandin would have been at by a landslide.
I still think Justin Hall would have gotten a lot of it just based on what I see from Twitter, not necessarily agreeing with it, and not something I actually reasonably see just because of how much Sheldon trusts Hall for PK duties.
Yeah.
And so you combine those things and you really have Sandin as your second defenseman on a power play special team that way, and then that really is something you can have Giordano also do, so especially because it's secondary. So I just don't see it, but it'll be an interesting call between now and what they do. But Conor Timmins is doing these things where the fact that he was able to kind of miss 3 games, come back and perform really well and score and get a timely goal is certainly boding well, not only for the Leafs winning a trade per se, but actually just getting a diamond in the rough that Arizona essentially kind of wrote off for the fact that he was injured all the time. So there is always that question mark, and there were some gasps when he got into that collision and went into the room that everyone thought, oh, but then he came back and his first shift, he scores a goal. All right, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Wayne Simmons, who also got back into the lineup for the first time in a while against his former team, and we'll touch on a little bit of what the Leafs were like in the first half of the 2022-2023 season. You're listening to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. Make a play, Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies. Rink Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.
Do you want to get your business in front of a large, loyal, and engaged audience? Email info@gogoatsports.com to develop an exclusive and custom campaign for your business.
And welcome back to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. And it is time for the Bodog line of the day. And Henny, and it was 11 games before Wayne Simmons got a chance to get back into the lineup. And I got to ask you, over or under for at 11 the next time Simmons gets back into the lineup here?
It's not going to be 11 games. It's way too long, and there's going to be opportunity given some of the opposition as you look at the schedule to see him come in. A nice guy to spell off Dryden Hunt, who I've been very impressed with, by the way. And you're not going to use Wayne Simmons all the time, but he's a guy who keeps himself in great shape, and he's a guy who you can sit and not have to worry about sulking and all that goes with it. He's just a true professional, always has been, but it's not going to be 11 games. I could see 5 games, 6 games. 11 games is, wow, it's almost Justin Hall type territory where you sit out 71 as a healthy scratch 4 years ago, or Frankie Corrado who couldn't see the ice, or who's the other player? It'll come to me in just a moment. Scored for St. Louis against Toronto. Another guy who's
Kelly
a
Rosen
scratch,
or Josh Levo.
Josh Levo, the pride of Alliston. You're not going to see that. But he's a guy that you can afford to do it. He's just a nice insurance policy to have on your franchise. Sheldon Keefe can go to when he needs it and not hear any complaints whatsoever. But 11 games, no, that's way too long.
Yeah, I agree with you in that regard. Don't forget, the Leafs are not carrying as many forwards now. They sent Joey Anderson down, and so Simmons is probably the only extra forward they're going to carry around for a little bit. And you know what? For a guy who hadn't played in a long time, I thought he played pretty well. I like that little nifty between the legs pass that he made there. It kind of reminded me of his game with the Jets, where he picked up that assist, and his first game for a while, where they actually had him and Kyle Clifford, who hasn't played. Well, he played one game after that, but hasn't really played since that time. And it was just how well they kind of meshed it going into that lineup, because they expected some grit and sandpaper and some punchiness against the Winnipeg Jets. And, it got a little bit punchy in this game toward the end against the Flyers. Not so much. I did like that when there was a Flyers player, I believe Brown, who did a little bit of a nudge behind Matt Murray in the third period after he was making the save, that Tavares just took exception to it and just shoved him right into the net. I think a lot of fans who kind of harp on the Leafs that they don't show enough response would have been really happy with something like that. So you're seeing it collectively, but having someone like Wayne Simmons kind of helps too when you don't have Dryden Hunt doing it, or someone else kind of doing it, or Jordy Ben, who's a depth defenseman that is going to have a hard time getting into the lineup, since we're already talking about Conor Timmins and being an everyday player with TJ Brody out. So that part is going to be interesting for sure as they kind of figure stuff out here. But let's talk about the first half of the season. It was a bumpy ride, similar to last year, where the first few games of October didn't go very well. You do recall, remember, Sheldon Keefe kind of flew off the handle in the first game of the season against the Montreal Canadiens when they lost that game late in regulation. They had a 4-game losing streak when they went to California. And it was against these Philadelphia Flyers where things kind of turned around, although at home. John Tortorella came to Sheldon Keefe's defense, kind of targeting the Toronto media, saying he hopes that he shoves it right back in our faces. I don't know what he meant by that. Just not tonight, although he did that night. And then the Leafs have kind of taken the reins since. And Mitch Marner kind of talked about, the differences and what they kind of have to do to kind of keep things going.
Yeah, it's been good. We still want to improve on some things of just bringing it every night, make sure it's the same consistency. But, I think we're happy with where we're at, and we're happy that we know we still got better and we're in a good spot.
Yeah, and even Mitch Marner can kind of point to the fact that although he's had a lot of good moments this season, there were some bad. I mean, there was the Flyers opening goal. It was a bad Mitch Marner clear that led to Travis Konechny getting a response 16 seconds after former Penguin and Pennsylvania rival Zach Aston Reese made it 2-0 Toronto in the first period. But these things are going to happen, and the Leafs have at least shown similar to last year that they can respond to it, but I think the defensive identity has been the real difference in this first half of the season compared to last year, although it has shown signs of slipping since the holiday break. That's really been the big difference if you want to believe that this year's team is different than the failed teams of of the previous seasons that haven't been able to get past the first round.
Yeah, that month of October, Dave, 4-4-2, and I don't want to get too much into this because we're going to talk about it on our podcast on Tuesday, but they've gone 25-5 since then. So yeah, I think you learn from these situations. Mitch certainly learns from the frustration of what happened in Anaheim and having to sit out a couple of shifts. 6 assists for Mitch in his last 4 games. He only played 15-20 tonight. Tavares played 13-30. It's incredible the amount of low ice time. For JT, another 3-point game. His lowest ice time this season was back against the Flyers, November 2nd, in that particular game you were talking about. And he had 3 goals and an assist in that game. So it's 7 points in 2 games where he had a combined 13, 25, 26 minutes of ice time. Like, that's incredible. Mm-hmm. And I think the talk about trades, and you mentioned it as well, and maybe I'm getting a touch off topic here, but maybe they're not going to have to worry about going out and getting a high-profile elite forward. And that's going to be hard to do given cap restrictions and all that goes with it. But they may not have to do it just given how well John Tavares is. He'll get bumped off the track every now and then, but all of a sudden he comes back and you see the work he put in front of the opposition net and behind his net, as you talked about, engaging physically. So, to get back to where they were, they're 57 points halfway through the season. They were 59 points a year ago. Toronto's got 3 less wins compared to where they were at the midway point last season, but they're right on par to where they have to go. And as long as the goaltending can continue the way it has for the most part this season, I think they're going to be very, very good. And again, the team's overall adherence to defensive hockey really impresses me. And back-to-back games, by the way, 5-0-1 in the latter half of back-to-backs. It's
Yeah.
You know what it's like as a journalist to have made that trip and covered the game last night. Exactly. It's hard and you're not playing, but you've got to hop on a flight tomorrow. The team is on its way right, an hour and a half after the game. They're flying back for 45 minutes to Toronto.
Yeah.
They'll get the day off and get a chance to regroup, but it's not easy. But this team has proven to be a resilient bunch, and I expect much more of the same in the second half. We've just got to get TJ Brody healthy on a consistent basis. He's just too important overall.
I will say, as much as that is difficult, they do have the benefit of a nice little charter plane that can get them home immediately. They can leave immediately, and then it's really like they were only away for, I don't know, 26 hours, 27 hours when you add it.
Yeah, so, Philly's quick.
Yeah, so they're not only is it quick, they get to their hotel, they can sleep in a little bit, they can get rested and not feel too out of sorts and be in their beds. You used to have that privilege. I've never experienced that myself. But when you have to get up at early in the morning after work, it does kind of throw off your day, and then you just learn how to be good at naps. That's really kind of the difference. And you had to experience it yourself. You had to make that adjustment from charter to non-charter, and it can be quite the thing. And I kind of am a little bit jealous of my West Coast colleagues in one way only, that there are just way more options where you could actually fly out after a game, like commercially, where in the East Coast, it's just not possible. With everything you have to do, the latest flight will not be a good option for you to actually get out and do it. So, it'd be great if there were more options that way, but this is a very first world, only me problem that I'm telling the listeners of right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Here's a story, Dave. I remember back in the team, we were out in the West Coast in California. Actually, the Leafs swept all 3 California games, and Dion came down with a horrendous flu. And who was the other player? This is terrible. But anyway, Dave Griffith, the travel manager, coaches were concerned about the players with the rest of the players. They stuck them back with Joe Bowen, Harry Neal, myself, producer Mark Askin, Jim Ralph, back there with us. So we had Dion, who got a couple of seats, and who was the other player? He sat with me. He was on the mend. We didn't get the flu or anything like that, but Dion was just death. In fact, we flew from California, Anaheim, to a game in Philadelphia, and Dion didn't get to play in it. He was in such rough shape.
Wow.
But again, first world problems, and we've got to, a charter where you hop on the plane, you've got your own seat, your flight crew knows exactly what you're drinking, phenomenal food. You get off the plane, bus is there, you get to the hotel, there's a table with a little card and your name on it, and up you go to your room. It's just so lickety split clean. It was a privilege to experience that for 17 years, and I thank the franchise for it. And it was a bit of adjustment to go back to what you're doing here, but listen, first world problems, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
It's funny you mentioned Dave Griffith, Stone Cold as he's known, just because the intimidation factor looked like Stone Cold Steve Austin as well, and he's now with the Arizona Coyotes. And I had to do a double take. I was like, oh yeah, like when we were there the other day and seeing him there as they were kind of dealing with the facilities coming in and out of what was a very unique experience at the Tempe Arena there where ASU plays. I wanted to ask you one more since we're on this topic here. Were you on that plane when they had the crazy turbulence?
Yes.
I remember. Like, tell us about that one.
Yes.
Because I remember only because of a certain colleague or players started talking about it that's why it became a news story. But I know that the rule is typically what happens on the plane stays on the plane. But since the players talked about it, it's fair game. But yeah,
I'm
what
no
was
longer
that?
on the plane.
What's that?
Well, there were several trips, one to Winnipeg, but I think the one you're talking about was a flight into Newark. And because the Leafs were whether they play the Rangers or the Devils, you fly into Newark. It's just cheaper docking costs for the charter aircraft. Dave, there was no way we were going to get into Newark. The winds were so strong. So we ended up landing just north of there in White Plains, New York, a much smaller airport. A bit of a commuter airport for the rich and famous.
I know
we
it
came
well.
in at, there you go. We came in sideways. I think Brian McCabe had thrown up. He wasn't feeling well.
It was definitely
and Wayne
right?
Primo, I think Wayne Primo was given the last rites. I think he had his wife's picture out, his kids' pictures out. He thought, deep down, like some of these guys are white knuckle flyers. Sergei Berezin, Alex Mogilny, platinum knuckle flyers.
Wow.
But I remember Primo on that particular flight, and I don't blame him for being frightened. I wasn't as audible as he was, but I was dead certain scared. But these pilots are fantastic. And we had a pilot, his name's Murray, and we always said, in a hurry, fly with Murray. He used to fly for the Leafs, and he'd fly for the Senators as well, and Murray brought that airplane in, literally at a diagonal angle, balancing the crosswinds, landed it. We all clapped, but it was a bumpy ride in. And this happens more often than not. You think of all the travel that these guys do, but they've got the best people looking after them. And that was a rough day. It was sunny out, but it was just windy as all hell. And we ended up going to White Plains and having to bus into New York City from up there.
Yeah, it's a nice little Metro North train ride from Manhattan to the Westchester area. A buddy of mine who used to live there, I'd go visit him and take the train up there. And a lot of times they take that. It's similar to Burbank if you've ever flown to that airport in LA. If you want to avoid the hustle and bustle of the major ones and you're just going to another US city, that seems to be an easier option for a lot of people. Similar to, like a lot of these bigger cities have these other smaller airports that kind of help you get away from it. Toronto, of course, has Toronto Island Airport, which is a little bit like that, but a bit of a hike just because of the ferry and whatnot. But also mentioned LA. There's West Palm Beach in Florida, which is not far from Fort Lauderdale, but there is another one, and Air Canada goes there direct, which I only learned recently. So there's a lot of these other little options and stuff. But before I get too off topic there, yeah, that is quite the crazy story. I remember that. And for all the travels that you do, I've been very fortunate that I've not had anything like that has induced fear and me having second thoughts about commuting. I'm generally a pretty good flyer, and Paul Hendrick is generally a pretty good host. And so we'll wrap that up as we finish out here on the first half of the regular season. Henny will join me again as we'll do an off-day pod on Tuesday to look back on the opening half of the season. For Paul Hendrick, I am David Alter. You've been listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's choice for free casino games, poker tips, and sports odds. Rink-Wide Toronto, pre-game, post-game, every game.
Darren Dreger and Ray Ferraro here from the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. New season is well underway, Ray, and we've got surprising storylines happening across the league.
You bet, Dreg. Surprising starts both the top and the bottom of the standings, and some of those coaching and GM seats have got to be starting to feel pretty warm right now.
We've got it all covered twice a week with some great guests joining us right through the end of the season.
It's the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. Check us out wherever you get podcasts or at rayandregs.com.